Philip II's conquest of Greece, the pivotal battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC. The scene is tense, set against the dawn mist in the fields near Chaeronea. The distant clamor of soldiers preparing for battle fills the air. Macedonian and Greek armies are positioned across from each other, with Philip's army ready for the decisive clash. Imagine a morning in August 338 BC. The sun barely breaks over the plains of Chaeronea, its first light revealing two great armies preparing for battle. On one side stands the combined forces of Athens and Thebes, desperate to preserve their independence. On the other, the disciplined phalanxes of Macedonia, led by King Philip II, a man who has reshaped his kingdom from a backwater state into a formidable military power. Philip surveys the battlefield with a steady gaze, flanked by his son, the young Alexander, eager to prove himself. The Macedonian troops are armed with the sarissa, a spear twice as long as the traditional hoplites, a symbol of Philip's military innovation. At the center, Philip orders a calculated retreat, drawing the Athenians forward and breaking their line. Then, with a sudden charge, the Macedonian cavalry led by Alexander crashes into the weakened Theban flank. The battle is over by midday. The once proud coalition of Athens and Thebes is shattered, its leaders slain or captured. The field is littered with shields bearing Athenian owls and Theban clubs, now trampled under the victorious march of the Macedonian phalanx. Philip has not just won a battle, he has cemented his control over Greece, achieving what no other king had before him, a unified Greek world under Macedonian rule. As the dust settles, he does not look back. He is already thinking of the next campaign, the one that will take him beyond Greece into the heart of the Persian Empire. But for now, Greece is his. The fall of Athens, 404 BC. The ruins of Athens, 404 BC, after its defeat in the Peloponnesian War. Imagine a scene of desolation with the city's walls dismantled and the once mighty fleet destroyed. The setting fades in with the sound of clashing swords, now distant, the sea waves lapping gently against the Athenian port, echoing the silence that follows a long battle lost. Picture it, Athens, the crown jewel of the Greek world, now stripped of its walls, its fleet reduced to wreckage, and its citizens facing an uncertain future. The city that once boasted of democracy, philosophy, and power is now governed by an oligarchy, the 30 tyrants, handpicked by Sparta to impose its rule. The Athenians, who once debated in the agora, now speak in hushed tones, fearful of retribution. How did the world's beacon of democracy fall so low? It's a story of shifting alliances, brutal warfare, and the relentless pursuit of power, one that will shape the next chapter of Greek history.
Hi, I'm Dr. David Santos. We're going to be continuing our study in ancient Mediterranean history. This week we're going to be looking at the time period from the end of the Peloponnesian Wars to the reign of Philip of Macedon, also known as Philip II or Philip the Great. Just so you know a little bit about him, he is Alexander the Great's father. So we're going to see that this is really a time period that transforms the Greek world into what Alexander the Great becomes. So, broadly speaking, we're going to look at the aftermath of the Peloponnesian Wars, the rise of Macedonia, finally with the assassination of Philip, and we're going to take a look at the historiography or the authors of this time period. So we're going to look at three different ancient authors. We're going to take a quick glance at three contemporary authors. So just by way of introduction, this is a transitional period. It's the period from the end of the Peloponnesian War to the rise of Macedon, And like I said, it's this transition period in ancient Greek history. It's characterized by the decline of traditional Greek city-states and the emergence of Macedonian dominance. We're going to explore some key themes. We're going to include the political instability that weakens the city-states, the military innovations that transformed warfare, and Philip's strategic diplomacy. And that's really what unifies Greece under Macedonian leadership. The events of this era, they're not only shifted the balance of power in Greece, but also laid the groundwork for Alexander the Great's conquest. And that's really what brings in this new age of this Hellenistic influence that we see. Even by the time we get to the biblical era, we see the Hellenistic influence has been laid heavily upon the world of the Bible, and especially that time period that we often call the silent years, in between the end of the Old Testament and the period of Jesus Christ. So we see that being the Hellenistic period. It's Philip first, then Alexander is going to set the stage for what we really refer to as the Hellenistic era. So we've covered the Peloponnesian War, but we just want to do a little bit of review. So we're really looking at the end of the Peloponnesian Wars for this lecture. So thinking about the aftermath of the Peloponnesian War, it's really looking around basically 400 BC. This is a significant period where there's upheaval in Greece. Athens has been defeated in 404 BC by Sparta. This led to the dismantling of its long walls and fleet, along with the establishment of an oligarchic regime, and they were known as the 30 Tyrants. So if they're called the 30 Tyrants, you can guess they're probably not the guys you want to vote for in this election season. So Sparta emerges as the dominant power. They enforce pro-Spartan oligarchies all across Greece. So its harsh rule and economic decline fueled widespread discontent. Persian influence resurfaces in this time period with the King's Peace. That's a treaty in 386. So it reinforced Persian control over the Ionia, and left the Greek city-states autonomous. But the problem is they become greatly weakened. So the rising dissatisfaction with Spartan dominance, that sets the stage for Thebes' ascent. So there's always a power vacuum. Anytime one, in this case, city-state is weakened, someone else is going to come behind them eventually. It may take time. That's what eventually happens. So Thebes defeat the Spartans and in 371, and that effectively ends the Spartan hegemony or control of the vast region that we just commonly call Greece, and the Thebes gain power. So we can broadly just say the end of the war and immediate consequences is characterized by a couple things. It's the defeat of Sparta, dismantling of the long walls, and the Athenian fleet, and there's this establishment of their preferred political system, and Spartan control comes on, and then it's lost later on. The Persian involvement there is interesting. It's like we said, it's that King's Peace. There's the Persian role as a mediator, and as the mediator, they're leveraging influence over Greek politics. So there's this reinforcement of Persian control and autonomy of Greek city-states. So in addition to the aftermath of the war, we see Theban power come along, and Spartans lose control. So let's move on to the rise of Macedonia under Philip. So we're going to see Philip as an interesting individual to study. I think there's a lot more we could learn about him, but he tends to be overshadowed a bit by his son. But I think that's really something we ought not do. So, just broadly speaking, geopolitical position is Macedon is a peripheral kingdom north of Greece, often overshadowed by Greek powers, and they tend to be a little bit less stable than much of the rest of Greece. And even when you look at how, say, Athenians viewed Greeks from Macedonia, they had a little bit of an accent. They were often seen as less than real Greeks. And as you know, hopefully I've mentioned before, Greeks really look at what is the language you speak, and anything other than Greek, then you must be a barbarian. And that's how they saw barbarians speaking. They just kind of said bar. They didn't really have a language. That's how they heard it. But they kind of used that same attitude towards Macedonians because of their accent. So the rise of Macedonia under Philip begins around 359. In that time period, before Philip II's reign, Macedonia was, like we said, this peripheral kingdom. They're off to the north. They're being overshadowed by the big city-states. And the region struggled with political instability. It's marked by frequent succession crises. That weakens the authority that those rulers have. So, in addition, Macedonia faced persistent external threats from all these neighboring tribes. Because think about it, they're on the edge of barbarian territory, so they always have an enemy at their doorstep. So they have these external threats that they're always facing, and they even have incursions from other Greek city-states. So the combination really creates this fragmented culture. It's fragmented politically. They're pretty fragile. They have all these military vulnerabilities, and that limits the influence that they have over the rest of the Greek regions. As Philip ascends, a lot of that's going to begin to change. The initial changes, overcoming internal dissent and repelling external invaders. And he does that through these military reforms. So recognizing this need for military strength, Philip implements these extensive reforms, and that includes the creation of the Macedonian phalanx. So want to know how did that begin? It's right here. So they utilize this long sarissa spear, and it's much longer than the traditional hoplite would have had. And Philip also professionalized the Macedonian army. He brings in cavalry, and he blends it with infantry units. So they're enhancing their mobility, and as they become a professional army, they can use these long sarissa spears, and they become very agile. Their hoplites could move quickly. They could turn quickly, even with these long spears. And that's something that no one else had done. So that becomes the backbone of their military. And they really figured out how to use formations to their advantage and how to use cavalry, especially on flanks. And they'd use these formations that would just envelop, surround, and crush these enemy troops. So we also see Philip, he's a strategist, and he understands politics, including gaining alliances through marriage, using marriages as a means to having alliances, and he's good at the manipulation of Greek politics. So in his diplomatic strategies, they're effective as effective as his military reforms. So contributing to this rise of Macedon. So he secured alliances through marriages with elites from Illyria and Thessaly and others. So he creates these political ties that expanded Macedonia's influence. So beyond these alliances, he manipulated internal factions within these cities, within his own city-states, and this supporting rival factions to weaken their unity and create opportunities for Macedonian dominance. So he'd play people against each other. So this blend of diplomacy and strategic manipulation, that is really what allows Philip to establish strong foothold in Greek affairs. Now remember, he's a little bit of an outsider, and I kind of look at him a little bit like Napoleon in the modern era, as someone from the outside who uses both marriages and political manipulation in order to gain a foothold and get what he wants. So the rise of Macedonia under Philip, here we have an interesting little account. There are no surviving quotes directly attributed to Philip, but there are several accounts of his words and deeds from other historians from the ancient world. So here's one of those, just to give you a little bit of a flavor of who Philip is. And this is called the divide and conquer warning. So Philip's laying siege to a city, and he's reported to have sent a message, and the message said, "If I enter your city, I will destroy it." So the response is, "What makes you so sure you can enter?" And Philip, his response is very famous: "The gates will open by a gold key." So, and what he's getting at there is he's going to pay someone off to open the gates and let him in. Now, we later see the Romans did this after him, and we see other countries doing that beforehand. So, like Cyrus the Great was good at doing these things, having doors open to him that would have shocked others that it would happen that way. So Philip's conquest begins with this third sacred war, and we're going to quickly look at the origins of the conflict and Philip's role. We're going to maybe just hit the highlights here and then go into the deeper conversation. So in the origins, it's really about the seizure, the capture of the treasures from Delphi, and that's probably the most famous of the Greek oracles. So there's a temple there, and almost everyone, if you needed information, you needed an oracle, everyone went there. And we're going to see in the next lecture, Alexander the Great even goes to Delphi and asks for a prophecy. We'll dig deeper into the history and archaeology of Delphi at that time as well. But for this moment, it's enough just to say the temple was sacked, treasures taken, and that sets the stage for this third sacred war. So we see Philip's role in strategic intervention as a defender of Apollo's sanctuary, and a gain of seats at the Delphic gatherings. So this really boosts Macedonian influence in Greece. So, Third Sacred War began in 356 BC. It's triggered by the Phoceans, their seizure of the Delphic treasury, and they sack the Temple of Apollo. So Philip seized this opportunity to position himself as the protector of Apollo's sanctuary. So you see, he sees something that took place. His enemies just did something, and he can now use this as a means to go to war with no problem and have allies as he goes to war and play one faction against the next. So it's a great opportunity. And he becomes both military and diplomatic mediators, and he gradually takes control of key territories and also gains a prominent seat with other Greek city-states. So the council that oversaw the Delphi, once you're on that, it's kind of like maybe joining the Supreme Court in a sense. So he's able to wield power. So this is the maneuver that not only solidified Macedonian influence in Greece, but also enhances his prestige and paves the way for what's going to come next. So in 338, we see this establishment of Macedonian hegemony, and it's at this battle of Caronosia, and it's this decisive victory over Athenian and Theban forces. Key role played by the Macedonian phalanx and cavalry, which also included Alexander, by the way, who was, even as a very young man, at that point, is really a boy, is a fantastic horseman and general. And then we see this unification of Greek states under Macedonian leadership. Philip declares his own hegemony or control with the goal of launching a campaign against Persia. So as he gains control, he looks out and says, how can I unify these Greek city-states? And what we really need is we need a grand goal, and that grand goal should simply be, let's take out Persia. So he's playing off of these nationalistic ideas in Greece that Persia is the enemy, and Persia has been laying influence over us. They have control of some of our outposts. We need to gain those back. So through that, we come to the assassination of Philip and its implications. So he is killed by a bodyguard during a festival, and there's lots of theories of the motive. Let's take a look at that. So the circumstances here are Philip II was assassinated in 336. It's during a public festival, and this public festival was celebrating his daughter's marriage. He was killed by his bodyguard, and it initially appeared to be an act driven by personal grievances. So later, the motives behind the assassination continue to remain a topic of debate, with some theories suggesting possible involvement by Queen Olympus, which is, or some even say Alexander, Persian agents having potential motives for Philip's removal. So assassination, it abruptly ends Philip's reign, obviously, and really sets the stage for this transition to Alexander. So a famous detail, Philip had reportedly dismissed his bodyguards just before entering the theater to appear as a man confident in his power and beloved by his people. So in doing that, he exposed himself to this fatal attack, and this dramatic decision contributed to the enduring symbolism of his assassination. And we have some theories. The motives for the assassinations are debated among ancient historians, but some suggest that it was a personal vendetta. Others argue it was part of a broader conspiracy involving his wife, Olympias, or even Alexander the Great himself, who wanted to speed up the succession process. So we're going to just take a look at his legacy. Transformation of Macedonia is the main one, and those reforms that we talked about, both military and providing the means for having a different kind of Greece. Where now you don't have these individual city-states as it had been for generations. Now you have a unified Greece under a centralized, localized power under one ruler, and that was Philip. It's going to be Alexander next. So it changes what Greece is all about. And it's going to change them intellectually as well. Many of those things that we think of when we talk about Athens and the philosophers from all these different schools, a lot of that stuff is going to really be reduced or even come to an end. So briefly here, historical perspectives. We have Diodorus and Justin, their overviews of Philip's reign and military campaign. And then we have Plutarch in Life of Alexander. He gives us details of Philip's assassination and relationship with Alexander. So Diodorus and Justin they each have their own work, and they provide a comprehensive overview of Philip's reign and military campaign. So if you're wondering, if you're interested in researching Philip, these are the places you go. These are also going to be some of the historians you're going to go to if you want to look at Alexander. So Diodorus, he offers a detailed chronological account of Philip's rise to power, and he focused on military reforms, key battles, political strategies that led to Macedonian dominance over Greece. And Justin's work, while a condensed version of another previous work, also covers Philip's military conquests, alliances, and diplomacy. So in his work, there's this emphasis on strategic brilliance, and he talks about Philip's ambition. So both authors highlight Philip's pivotal role in the transforming Macedonia into a dominant power. So they also recognize that sets the stage for Alexander's conquest. So Alexander inherits an army and a new Greece with a central power. So he's able to take those and then look towards Persia and the rest of the world after that. Plutarch takes a little bit different view, but his work is called The Life of Alexander, and it offers this critical insights into Philip's assassination and his relationship with Alexander the Great. So the primary focus is on Alexander's exploits. Plutarch provides a detailed narrative of Philip's death, and he examines the potential motives and suspects, including his son Alexander and his wife. Plutarch also explores the complex and tense dynamics between Philip and Alexander. So he portrays them both as being admirable figures that he could look to as high quality figures from their area, and that there's this rivalry that defined their relationship. So Plutarch's work, written centuries after Philip's reign, it blends historical analysis with this sort of moralistic interpretation, and it provides us really deep, rich understanding of this time. So that's one for you to check out if you want to look more into this. Just a couple people to observe if you want sources on this topic from modern authors. Peter Green is the one, number 2 there. He has an analysis of Philip's broader impact on Greek politics and culture, and I've looked at quite a bit of his work. Nicholson, it has a reassessment of Philip's relationship with the Greek states and his military innovations. And the first one here has views on Philip's reforms and diplomatic strategies. So finally, this period is an important period for us to understand, simply to see this shift in power from Spartan dominance to Theban ascension, and ultimately that changing to a time period where Macedonia has hegemony over this entire region. So important time period for us to understand, and important for us to understand how we get from Greek city-states to Alexander the Great. It's not something that happened instantly, but it has this process, and quite an interesting time period. So as always, if there's anything I can do for you, please let me know. And I hope this continues to be a blessing to you. Look forward to seeing you next time.
The assassination of Philip II, 336 BC. The setting is the royal palace at Ægæ during a grand celebration. It is a moment of triumph, but a dark twist is about to unfold. The scene is filled with the sound of festive music, laughter, and cheers as Philip II, the king who unified Greece, enters the courtyard dressed in royal splendor. Imagine the scene. Philip II, the king of Macedonia, has just overseen the marriage of his daughter, and the courtyard of Ægæ is filled with the sounds of celebration. The king, in a moment of triumph, strides confidently into the hall, acknowledging his loyal subjects. But in a flash, the revelry turns to horror. His bodyguard, Pausanias, lunges forward, a dagger in hand. The king collapses, his life extinguished by the very man meant to protect him. Was it revenge? Was it a conspiracy? The question would haunt Alexander, his son, as he stepped into his father's shoes, uncertain of who might be friend or foe. Philip's death did not just end his reign, it marked the beginning of Alexander's quest for vengeance and for empire. The long shadow of the Hellenistic world. The setting is Alexandria, centuries later, a bustling city of Greek architecture, libraries, and diverse cultures, an enduring symbol of the Hellenistic age. The scene is set in the bustling heart of Alexandria, with merchants speaking a blend of Greek, Egyptian, and other languages. Scholars wander through the vast libraries, studying texts from all over the known world. Centuries after Philip's death, his influence is still felt in cities like Alexandria, where Greek culture blends with local traditions, creating a new cosmopolitan world. This is the legacy of the Hellenistic age. A world where ideas, art, and science transcended the borders Philip once sought to conquer. The transformation began with his military campaigns, but it endured through the spread of Greek culture and thought, facilitated by his successors. As you look back on this era, remember that the world we've explored today was not just marked by battles won and territories claimed, but by a lasting cultural exchange that began with a Macedonian king's dream of unified Greece and a world beyond. The legacy of Philip II. The setting is Macedonia, soon after the death of Philip II. Alexander, the young heir, stands at the precipice of an empire about to expand. The scene is quiet, with only the distant sounds of mourning in the Macedonian capital. The young Alexander, now king, stands alone in front of his father's throne, reflecting on what lies ahead. As Alexander gazes upon the empty throne of Philip II, he is both haunted and inspired by his father's vision. Philip had reshaped the Greek world, transforming Macedonia from a peripheral kingdom to a dominating power that unified Greece under the League of Corinth. Yet his greatest ambition, to conquer Persia, remained unfulfilled. Now, with the weight of this legacy on his shoulders, Alexander must decide whether to complete his father's mission or carve a new path of his own. Philip's reforms, military strategies, and political alliances were not merely victories of the past. They were stepping stones for what would become one of the greatest conquests in history. In many ways, the Hellenistic age was born not in Alexander's campaigns, but in Philip's unifying vision.